فإن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم سبحان الذي أسرى بعبده ليلا من المسجد الحرام إلى المسجد الأقصى الذي باركنا حوله لنريه من آياتنا إنه هو السميع البصير وآتينا موسى الكتاب وجعلناه هدى لبني إسرائيل ألا تتخذوا من دوني وكيلا ذرية من حملنا مع نوح إنه كان عبدا شكورا وقضينا إلى بني إسرائيل في الكتاب لتفسدن في الأرض مرتين ولتعلن علوا كبيرا فإذا جاء وعد أولاهما بعثنا عليكم عبادا لنا أولي بأس شديد فجاسوا خلال الديار وكان وعدا مفعولا ثم رددنا لكم القرة عليهم وأمددناكم بأموال وبنين وجعلناكم أكثر نفيرا إن أحسنتم لأنفسكم وإن أسأتم فلها فإذا جاء وعد الآخرة ليسوءوا وجوهكم وليدخلوا المسجد كما دخلوه أول مرة وليتبروا ما علوا تتبيرا عسى ربكم أن يرحمكم وإن عدتم عدنا وجعلنا جهنم للكافرين حسيرا رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي اللهم ارحمنا بالقرآن واجعله لنا إماما ونورا وهدى ورحمة اللهم ذكرنا منه ما نسينا وعلمنا منه ما جهلنا وارزقنا تلاوته آناء الليل وأطراف النهار واجعله لنا حجة يا رب العالمين. Glory be to the one who took his slave at night from Masjid al-Haram to Masjid al-Aqsa, where we have blessed around it or around in order that we show him from our signs. Indeed, he is all hearing, all seeing. And we gave Musa the book and made it guidance for the children of Israel. Do not take other than me a wakil, i.e. do not commit shirk with me. Children and descendants of those who were carried on the ship with Nuh, indeed he was a grateful, thankful slave. We decreed, decided, forewarned, warned the children of Israel in the book that you will cause fasad, corruption, twice. And this will lead you to reach a great and high level of haughtiness, arrogance, which will entail such punishment so that they are warned. So when the first of the promises came, we raised against you slaves of ours who were powerful, mighty, and they probed into homes, and this was ever a promise fulfilled. Then we returned in your favor over them and strengthened you with wealth, children, and many resources, many people. If you do good, it is for yourself, and if you do bad, it is against yourself. So when the last of the two promises came, in order to disgrace you, shame, sadden your faces, and so that they entered into the masjid like they entered it the first time and destroyed it, a complete destruction. Perhaps, maybe, Allah will have mercy upon you. But if you now return, we shall return. If you return to fasad, we will return in destroying you again, and we have made Jahannam for the disbelievers a prison. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي اللهم ارحمنا بالقرآن واجعله لنا حجة يا رب وجعلنا إماما وهدى ورحمة اللهم ذكرنا منه ما نسينا وعلمنا منه ما جهلنا وارزقنا تلاوته آناء الليل وأطراف النهار واجعله لنا حجة يا رب العالمين. The history of Bani Israel. The story of Bani Israel is a story of Tawheed, prophets, jihad, scholars, ibadah, sharia. And it's also a story of shirk, idol worship, apostasy, fasad, destruction. You have in this previous nation, the previous Muslim ummah, many of these contradictions because they go through different phases. And inshallah, for those who are taking notes present here and those who are listening, taking notes, one of the main reasons why we are giving this lecture and why we are asking you to take notes is that when we give this first timeline, and inshallah this will be the first of 3 lectures, inshallah the next 2 will be, it's just cooling down, Zaki. It's cooling down. The next two lectures, inshallah, will be the periods that come after, up to now. But we're going to be talking about the ancient history of Bani Israel. But before we do that, I want to present our epistemology and our approach to sources. What would be my sources for presenting the history of Bani Israel? So, number 1, I will be using the Quran. The Quran is the preserved, verbatim words of Allah Azza wa Jal. Every word is true in text and meaning. This is what happened. Secondly, will be the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that's the saying of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his students. C will be the books of the history or tariq that have been written by Muslims, and my primary text that I used for this was Bidayah wa Nihaya of Ibn Kathir. And fourthly, we will be using the Tanakh. Now, what's the Tanakh? The Tanakh is the Old Testament. Now, there are about 3 or 4 terms that I'm going to be using in my talk, and I will be, let me explain what I will mean by each one. So first of all, I use the Tanakh. Now the Tanakh is the Jewish Old Testament. The Christian Old Testament is different to the Jewish Old Testament in the sense that, number 1, for the majority of it, it is the same. The Christians will also believe and have the same as part of their Old Testament, but the order of books are different. That's number 1 difference between the Jewish and Christian. And secondly, there's some books in the Christian Old Testament that are not in the Jewish one. So that's an important distinction that you must always remember. I used for this lecture the Tanakh, which is the Jewish Old Testament. However, though, I will be referring to it as the Old Testament because most of us know that the Old Testament more than we know the terminology of the word Tanakh. That's number 1. The second term that I'll be using will be the old area of Palestine from what's been described in the Tanakh and from other sources is Canaan or the Canaanites. I'll mention this, but when I say the term Canaan or the Canaanites, I mean Palestine. So I'm going to use the word Palestine because otherwise it can be confusing. Because Palestine is what we refer to as the whole area here. But when we look at the history, inshallah, you'll realize because there were Philistines that were living there were Canaan, the Canaanites, there were Jesuites and and other tribes and people in the area of modern day Palestine. The next term is in their books, they refer to Masjid al-Aqsa as the temple. Okay? So I'm not going to refer to it as the temple, but if you see it in the quotes that I use, then remember, and I will be using Masjid al-Aqsa because this is what we know the masjid to be, as that location, what they refer to as the temple. Ala kulli hal. So, if I can just ask the brother to go to the first slide. So that's Jazakallah khair. So, how do we understand the Tanakh? That's important first in terms of the sources that we're going to use. Now, as you can see here, they are the general Bible, the Old Testament, the Tanakh, is split into 3 sections. There's the first section is what they call the Torah, and we're gonna maybe I might mention this here, or maybe we'll have a separate complete lecture upon biblical studies, and maybe we can study these books more in depth and what they mean. But just for the sake of us now, because it's important for those of us who are students of knowledge, for those of us who study, we will see quotes from these chapters, from these books. And we need to understand that these books, what does it mean for us when we hear something? Because there are stories in the Old Testament which mention about Ibrahim alayhi salam, about Ismail, about Ishaq, about Yusuf, about Musa, okay, about Sulaiman, about Dawood. Now, you'll find some people making the mistake of trying to interpret our deen using these texts. So this is why it's important to understand what do we understand, or how should we approach these sources. So very high level, the books are split into what they call the Torah, which is the left column, the middle what they call the books of the prophets, okay, and then they have in Hebrew they say Kitabum and Nevium, I mean Nabiyum and Kitabum. The first 5 books is what they call the Torah, and then what they have is they have other books which are supposedly written by a number of their different prophets. Now, first thing is, their books, as a Muslim, when we approach their books, it's not like in our deen where the Quran is the word of Allah Azza wa Jal and we have it in one book which is separate. Their book as it exists now, okay, and each of these books that you're looking at in the slide, each of them have a different author and a different history and a different level of authenticity. Generally, you can group the first 5 books, okay, and there's studies which go into how they try to, there's something called the documentary hypothesis, which looks at how there were different authors and there's different strands within the first 5 books, because anybody who reads them can see there's contradictions, you can clearly see tampering, you can clearly see so many issues with the text. The second column of those books, they're by prophets. So what is survived of the Old Testament, there's the words of Allah Azza wa Jal, possibly. There's also the writings of their prophets, because unlike our Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, who did not know how to read or write, their Anbiya did. So their Anbiya did write, okay? So their writings, and then thirdly, what some of the Jewish rabbis ascribe to. So when they say the Torah, the first 5 books, they say Moses wrote it. So he wrote it. When they say Joshua, they say Joshua wrote it. Okay, so and each of these books, their prophets wrote it, which then mean that each of those books were written at a different period of time. As we're going to go through the centuries, their books, you get more books and more books and more books. And then, as I said, we can have a separate lecture about why was it that some books got included as part of the Old Testament. Because if the religion is the religion of Musa, then Musa had those 5 books, if you claim. Then these other books, why do you add them to your scriptures and whatnot? And they'll explain it in their particular way. Now, so that's the Tanakh, that's the Old Testament. Secondly, what's our position Islamically about what we take or what we understand from what they have written? Now, the Prophet ﷺ, is reported to have said, حدثوا عن بني إسرائيل ولا حرج. You can relate from the story of the children of Israel and there is no harm. And he also said that لا تصدقوا أهل الكتاب ولا تكذبوهم. Don't believe and don't disbelieve. If we can go to the next slide. Right here, you could take any of these stories that we find in the Quran and we find also in the Old Testament. What's our position to these stories? What's our position with these details? So, first of all, we must always remember that the Quran explains their book. Their book does not explain our book. So if you go and learn about the story, you mentioned the Quran, there's some ayat about Dawood alayhi salam. And he had 99 sheep, or 99 sheep and whatnot, and the people will quote from the Bible. Or we'll read about Prophet Lut alayhi salam in the Quran, then we'll go to the Bible and we find out there's also Prophet Lut. Let's find out what we can do, or let's find out what more information we can about Lut alayhi salam from the Bible. Or Ibrahim alayhi salam. Our previous lectures we were looking at Ibrahim alayhi salam, when the angels came to destroy the people of Lut, they first went to Ibrahim. And we know that story from the Quran, but if we go to the Old Testament, we also find that story, and there's details in there. So, when the Quran was revealed, it was revealed with the knowledge that this is what the people, the Jews and the Christians have with them, as to correct them. So our position is, this table, hopefully, it should help us understand when we find quotes from the Bible, what should it be? So, if something is in the Old Testament of a story or of a detail or from an event, and it's in both the Quran and the Old Testament, obviously our position that we accept that because Allah Ta'ala confirmed it. Secondly, if we find something in the Old Testament and the Quran, like the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam we just mentioned here, or like the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, and it then contradicts something explicit in the Quran, obviously we reject that from the Old Testament. If we find something in the Old Testament and in the Quran and it contradicts the meaning, again we reject it. But then if we find something in the Old Testament, we don't find it in the Quran, and it agrees with we don't find it in the Quran at all, that detail. What should our position be with something that is some information about some previous prophets that we don't have in the Quran? The Quran didn't mention anything about it, but we have it in the Old Testament about that prophet, about that Nabi. And it agrees with the general and overall meaning of the Quran. What do? We don't accept it, we don't reject it. It can be used as information. Okay? And then if there's something, obviously, I've tried to just list all the scenarios. If there's something not in the Old Testament in the Quran, obviously we accept that. That's just obvious. But I wanted to just list those. You can go back to the other slide, just the general one, if you want. Okay, so this is the time now, inshallah, we're going to start to whiteboard. Okay? Okay, so now we're going to start the actual lecture, inshallah. Now, my intention is that I don't go into detail with information that we generally come across all the time. I'm going to try to cover those parts which are not commonly covered, and the purpose is that when you have this timeline in front of you, that we're going to break down for the first 1400 years, 1,500 years of the history of Bani Israel, you are able to then bolt on whatever you hear later onto this timeline. And then you understand the context. So hopefully, for example, we've heard the story about Yusha bin Nun pointing to the sun, and then the sun stopping. Well, what happened before that? What happened after that? And as I said before, there's so much, inshallah, hopefully we can be able to bolt on, so if you can start getting your pens ready, bi'idhnillah. So The story begins with Ibrahim alayhi salam. Ibrahim alayhi salam had two children, Ishaq, or what they call, who they call Isaac, and Ismail, or what they refer to as Ishmael. Ishaq had a son called Yaqub. Actually Ishaq had another son called, who they refer to as Esau. He was actually the twin brother of Yaqub. And if you ever come across the Edomites, that's the descendants of the twin brother of Yaqub, according to the Old Testament. So the Yaqub alayhi salam. Now Yaqub is who they call Israel. Okay? Yaqub is who they call Israel. So, and Israel then had, or Yaqub alayhi salam had 12 children. Okay? So you know when we always refer to the 12 tribes of Israel, that's the 12 tribes they go back to Yaqub. Obviously we have Ismail alayhi salam, and then from this lineage comes the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Now, we learn that Allah Ta'ala promised them the land of Canaan, the land of Palestine. Now, how did the people go from being in Canaan to Egypt and back? So, just to remind ourselves, one of the sons of Yaqub alayhi salam was Yusuf. And Yusuf alayhi salam, whilst Yaqub alayhi salam was in Palestine, the brothers plotted. He was then sold into slavery. Yusuf alayhi salam is taken to Egypt. And we know the story from there. Yusuf alayhi salam rises the ranks. His brothers are then they come to Egypt and they settle in Egypt. Okay? So we all know that so far. They settle in Egypt, and from Egypt, what happens is they rise to prominence, and then in Egypt, there's a change of leadership, there's a coup, and the new leaders don't like the Bani Israel, and they are enslaved. Okay? Then to this nation was sent Musa alayhi salam. Okay, now from Musa alayhi salam, Musa, as we all know, there's so much in the Quran about Musa. Okay, he was their prophet, and Musa alayhi salam, he then, as we know, it goes to Pharaoh and says, let the people go. The Pharaoh chases them, and then Pharaoh is drowned. Now they're on the other side, right? They're on the other side after the sea split. Now, where are they going? They're going back to Palestine. They're going to make their way back to Palestine. Now, once they've made it to the other side, we know that they start to this is the first instance where they start to worship the golden calf, like a cow. When Musa alayhi salam was away, they've already started to fall into shirk. Okay, this is the first time where they fall into shirk, where Musa alayhi salam is away, and they say, make us a ilah, like they have an ilah to Harun alayhi salam, and then they do this. When Musa alayhi salam returns, the ruling that Allah Ta'ala gives him is those who committed shirk need to be killed as apostates. So 3,000, the Old Testament tells us about 3,000 of Bani Israel were killed by the Bani Israel themselves for worshipping who engaged in that shirk, to purge them out of their nation itself. From here, now they're making their way, okay, they're making their way there and to Canaan or Palestine. Now, the people the Canaanites, I'm going to write the names here. Canaanites. Let's put the Philistines. Let's put the Jebusites. Let's put the Hittites. And there were others as well. So these are different people that existed. When Musa alayhi salam takes the people and they're on their way, they're making their way to Palestine itself, he sends, according to the Old Testament here, and remember our approach to sources here. So when I quote something from the Quran, we accept. We quote something that could be from information from the Old Testament. What should be our position? I'm just quoting this as information. He sends 12 spies to recon the situation, because now they're going to have to go and fight. Okay? Now, along this route, according to the Old Testament, there have already been some battles. But now just as they're about to now they're going to launch this battle, of the 12 spies, they come back and they say, no, this is too much. We can't fight. We can't fight. These guys are too strong. You and your Lord go and fight. But 2 of these spies said, no, let's do that. And we know that from the Quran, Allah mentions the 2 people that said to Musa alayhi salam that we're ready, whereas the rest didn't. Now, because of this disobedience, where all they but needed to do was enter, and they did not, they were then punished for 40 years in the wilderness. Right? 40 years in the wilderness, and in the 40 years in the wilderness, the generation changed. Now we know this generation didn't want to fight. Yusha, who was the student of Musa alayhi salam, was still with Joshua, they call him, or Yusha bin Nun.
Does the Old Testament give a number of the Bani Israel?
About who made the actual Exodus? They call it the Exodus. I didn't recall the number here, but I think it does give a number. I think it's in the hundreds of thousands. It gives that number, but I don't have the figure with me here. So they're in the wilderness. Musa alayhi salam passes away during this period of time. That generation changes. But they all know that they need to fight. They need to fight to take the land. But look at the situation. Yusha bin Nun, now 40 years later, is going to enter Palestine. I'm using that synonymously with Canaan. And look at the barakah of the efforts that they made. Look at the longevity of that target, of that focus and that goal that they had. That even 40 years later, he wasn't going to give up. And they say, obviously Yusha bin Nun is old at this point. Okay, so Yusha bin Nun is they now are they're on the verge of now reconquering or conquering Palestine, and the battle is taking place, and in this battle it's on a Friday, okay, and at Saturday is the Sabbath, which they don't fight. So on Friday, in the battle, knowing how the situation that they are in, he points to the sun and he says to the sun that you are under the command of Allah and I'm in the command of Allah, so you stop. And the sun stopped for them to fight the battle and win. And look at when you are on Allah's side, look what Allah Ta'ala will do for you. He'll split the sea. He'll make the sun stop for you. And and you can see how many people, that had learned from the lesson of 40 years of humiliation. Now, the one thing I didn't say, brother, if you're going to just not keep disturbing, let me leave them as it is. I want you to place yourself in these stories. In the stories themselves, who are you in the story? And also, as a Muslim ummah, what do we learn from this? Because they are the first Muslim ummah. And we're going to learn how much they fell into shirk again and again. Okay? And how they rose and how they fell. And how they rose and how they fell. And how Allah Ta'ala had mercy upon them. And mercy and mercy. So, they now conquer parts of Canaan, Palestine. They conquer it. When they conquer it, Yusha bin Nun, he splits the areas And those areas are given to the 12 tribes. And then this period of time is called, if you look at the Old Testament in the books, it's called Judges. The book of Judges, because the book of Judges is in reference to, they didn't have one king. These commanders had, who were responsible for legal issues. They were the ones in charge, and they had their own little areas. Okay, this is called Judges. Now, during this period, they were fighting jihad. They were struggling, fought in Allah Ta'ala's way. There was some who were good, some who were bad. Now, at this time, when they would fight, at this period, when they would fight, they would have the tabut, the Ark of the Covenant. Now, in that box, they would have, as Allah Ta'ala tells us in the Quran, they would have remnants from Bani, from the artifacts of Prophet Musa and Harun. And what they would do is it would be a sense of sakina for them. So when they would go to battle, they'd send that forth first, okay? And they would use it as an inspiration to win battles. According to them, they had parts of the tablets of Musa alayhi salam that were in those box, in the box, you could say, the Ark of the Covenant. Some people that started to fall into shirk at this moment, at this time, okay? Now, this period was also then a period where there was ups and downs. The Philistines, these people here, whom later on Jalut comes from, in some of their battles, they come and take the Ark. So they lose the Ark. And there's these battles and skirmishes, and they're losing this battle, losing this struggle between themselves. So, then we come, after this then, we come to a period which is where they actually rise to a superpower. And what happens here is the story of Talut and Jalut. Palestine, you can. Initially they do, but then once they've been given the land, there's why is they all disunited as well, right? Because they've got 12 of them, they've all got their own areas. Some are losing battles, some are winning, some are getting corrupted, some are not. Some are falling into ridda and apostasy and shirk and idol worship, and some are not. Idol worship, you're going to see, is just so prevalent in their history, where some of them fall into shirk, to the extent that we're going to learn where they would place, some of them would make basic masjid with idols in them. Some of them, at some stages, put idols into Masjid Aqsa. Some of them would do child sacrifices, i.e. kill the children and burn them in their offerings. And some of them would actually worship Baal and other idols along with Allah Azza wa Jal. Okay? But at this stage, they're disunited. Now, what happens is, they realize that, look, we're all separate, we're all split between ourselves. We need unity. We need one leader, one king who we're all going to fight under, and then we'll get the victory. This is the stage we're going to look at now. So Allah Ta'ala tells us in the Quran, ألم ترى إلى الملأ من بني إسرائيل من بعد موسى إذ قالوا لنبي لهم ابعث لنا ملكا نقاتل في سبيل الله قال هل عسيتم إن كتب عليكم القتال ألا تقاتلوا قالوا وما لنا ألا نقاتل في سبيل الله وقد أخرجنا من ديارنا وأبنائنا فلما كتب عليهم القتال تولوا إلا قليلا منهم والله عليم بالظالمين. So do you not know when the chiefs, these judges you could say, of Bani Israel, after the time of Musa, where they said to their prophet, now who was this prophet? It was someone whom we refer to in English as Samuel, or Samuel. This prophet they said to this prophet that choose for us a king, one king that we're all going to fight in the way of Allah behind. He said, how will it be that when it's made wajib upon you to fight, that you then choose not to fight? They said, why will we not fight in the way of Allah Ta'ala when we've been kicked out of our homes and from our children? But then when fighting was ordered upon them, only a few of them but turned back, and Allah Ta'ala is knower of the zalimin. وَقَالَ لَهُمْ نَبِيُّهُمْ. So they asked the Prophet, look, decide for us, pick someone, pick one of the judges, pick one of the leaders to be the one whom we're going to fight behind. So he says, وَقَالَ لَهُمْ نَبِيُّهُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ قَدْ بَعَثَ لَكُمْ طَالُوتَ مَلِكًا. He said, Allah has decided to choose Talut, or in what they refer to as Saul, Talut, as the king. قالوا أن يكون له الملك علينا ونحن أحق بالملك منه ولم يؤت سعة من المال. So he said, how can he be the king? Because he was one of the judges. How can he be one of the ones you've chosen when we have more right to be the king? We're leaders already, and he hasn't got much money. He hasn't got much resources. He's not rich. Why are we choosing him for? قال إن الله استفاه عليكم وزاده بسطة في العلم والجسم. He said, indeed Allah Ta'ala chooses for you, or chooses him over you, and he has increased him in knowledge and in body, and in his body. So Allah Ta'ala, these are the leaders that the believers and the Muslims need. That was a leader that was chosen to lead the people. That's the qualities of people, both knowledge and strength, and physically strong. And you're going to find people today who are either strong but not knowledgeable, or knowledgeable but not strong. And you need both of them in your positions of leadership, because this is a position of responsibility. وَاللَّهُ يُؤْتِي مُلْكَهُ مَنْ يَشَاءُ. This is Allah's decision. This is Allah Ta'ala's decision. And He's in a test. Obviously, you're asking for something, Allah will give it to you, and then we're going to learn about this test. And that's the lesson for us also. وَاللَّهُ وَاسِعٌ عَلِيمٌ. وَقَالَ لَهُمْ نَبِيُّهُمْ إِنَّ آيَةَ مُلْكِهِ أَنْ يَأْتِيَكُمُ التَّابُوتُ فِيهِ السَّكِينَةُ مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ وَبَقِيَّةٌ مِمَّا تَرَكَ آلَ مُوسَى وَآلَ هَارُونَ تَحْمِلُهُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَةً لَكُمْ إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. Then the Prophet said, in the sign that this person has truly been chosen is that ark that contained all those remnants of the prophets, the remnants of what the prophets had, it's going to be, which had tranquility from your Lord, that will be then returned to you with angels carrying it back. That's a karama for them, to show you that really he has been chosen by Allah Azza wa Jalla, to give you that ayah and that strength. Okay, and you know, with these ayat and with these blessings that come to us, they are either hujjah for us or against us. So that gave them the positive attitude that, okay, this is maybe our leader. But look what then happens. فَلَمَّا فَصَلَ طَالُوتُ بِالْجُنُودِ. So according to some estimates, there were about 80,000 in the army. Okay, 80,000 in the army. فَلَمَّا فَصَلَ طَالُوتُ بِالْجُنُودِ. So when Talut split his army, or brought forth his army, he said, Allah Ta'ala has decided to test you with water. Okay. One of the brothers is saying that he's read that the ark ended up outside his house, obviously being with the Philistines, and this battle will be against the Philistines. Jalut is from the Philistines. So it's been taken back from them and miraculously is returned. And the brother is trying to point out that it's in front of Talut's house as a sign. So now Allah Ta'ala will test you with water or with this river. Whoever drinks from it, because they need to cross this river, and according to some narration, it was the river Jordan. But they need to cross this river to get to the army. فَمَنْ شَرِبَ مِنْهُ فَلَيْسَ مِنِّي. Whoever drinks from it will not be from us. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَطْعَمْهُ فَإِنَّهُ مِنِّي. And whoever does not drink from it or eat from it, إِلَّا مَنِ اغْتَرَفَ غُرْفَةً بِيَدِهِ, except from just a little handful, or one hand's worth of water, is acceptable for him. فَشَرِبُ مِنْهُ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا مِنْهُمْ. So how many people drank? Many fell from this. They failed at this test. This test, as we've mentioned before, this test, rationally speaking, what was the need for this test? It was not like the test came about with something which was beyond them that they had no control over. This was a test in the halal. To test, are you deserving of victory? To just test your obedience. Will you be obedient to the Amir? Because the Amir is going to tell you to do something. There's a whole river of water, but you're being told don't drink from the river. Why? The question is why. So you can very logically ask the question. It's a rhetorical question. The question is, why would you be told that to do that when there's no need? If there was a limited amount of water, and then you're told only have 1 cup worth each, you can understand, because it's just, you have limited water. If you've got a whole river there, so from the 80,000, they say the people that failed was 76,000. We're left with 4,000. We're left with 4,000. فلما جاوزه هو الذين آمنوا معه. So when they crossed the river and those who were now with them, because those who drank, you're out. When they then saw the army of Jalut, they saw Jalut, who himself is described in the Old Testament as like a giant, these big warriors, they said, قالوا لا طاقتنا اليوم بجالوت بجنوده. They said, we have no power this day against these. We're finished. We're finished. However, and this is the sign of true iman, قال الذين يظنون أنهم ملاقو الله كم من فئة قليلة غلبت فئة كثيرة بإذن الله والله مع الصابرين. They said, the ones who knew that they're going to meet Allah, and that's the sifat of iman and belief. They had this belief and yaqeen that they're going to meet Allah Azza wa Jal. That then led them to say, how many a time has it been that a small group of people have defeated a large group by the permission of Allah Ta'ala. And if you look at the history of Muslim fighters throughout the ages, how often is it that the believers were mere thousands against enemies that were 10 times as many as them? But then Allah Ta'ala, this is Wallahu ma'a sabirin, this was their Allah Ta'ala is with the patient. ولما برزوا لجالوت وجنوده قالوا ربنا أفرغ علينا صبرا وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. Then when they met the army of Jalut, they said, oh Allah, pour upon us patience and make our feet firm and give us victory over the disbelievers. It's reliance upon Allah Ta'ala. It's the yaqeen with Allah Azza wa Jal, knowing that Allah Ta'ala is the one who gives victory and He's the one who's going to help us at this time. فهزموهم بإذن الله, and then they defeated them with the permission of Allah Ta'ala. وقتل داود جالوت وآتاه الله الملك والحكمة وعلمه مما يشاء ولولا دفع الله الناس بعضهم ببعض لفسدت الأرض ولكن الله ذو فضل على العالمين. So they defeated them by the permission of Allah Ta'ala, and Dawood killed Jalut. Now Dawood was in the army of Jalut, a young boy, and the final number as the Sahaba mentioned from the hadith in Bukhari and from the Muslim of Imam Ahmad, that the final number of people who fought Jalut's army was the same amount of people that fought at Badr. And these ayats of Surah Al-Baqarah are just before the Battle of Badr, as in preparation for the believers. And the Sahaba would say that we were the same number, just like them. So you can see here, this was test after test after test. Now, some scholars say that when the people of the 4,000, the people who even said the first statement about there's no power, we've got no power today, we're going to lose this battle. Some say that at that point there was more deserters, and then others say no. Well, actually, some ulama from amongst them, they strengthened them at that time. But the point is, it's about perspective. It's about perspective. So here, what we have is we have the establishment then of the United Kingdom of what they would refer to as the United Kingdom of Israel. They call it united because we're going to see that there's going to be a split. So from here, now they've been victorious. So now Talut, who's the king, he passes away and he makes Dawood alayhi salam, the Prophet Dawood, as the leader. And Dawood's son is Sulaiman. This was the golden age and the height of their power, Sulaiman alayhi salam, where we know about his control over animals, over jinn, and you could say he was the superpower of the world at that time, Sulaiman alayhi salam. So now the territory is expanded. It's a mighty power, mighty force. After Sulaiman alayhi salam, his son, immediately after Sulaiman alayhi salam, his son, when he becomes the king, there's a split. The split is from here, and this is now the whole nation, you could say, of Israel. Now, we're going to try to explain this because we will learn when actually the term Jew came. Were the original people here all Jews, or were they Jews after? And I'll tell you I'll explain to you what I mean. And also Israel. But because this nation that splits off, they call themselves Israel, and then later they also call themselves Israelites. We'll try to explain what we mean by different terms and different periods that occur. So when the split happens, 10 tribes go to the northern kingdom, they call it. The northern kingdom. And 2 remain here. So 10 and 2. 2 is from the remain, and this kingdom, which is called the southern kingdom, this is called Judah. Because one of the tribes was called Judah. And the beginning of the people as Jews, according to the Jews themselves, is from this moment onwards. Okay? So these are not Jews. They're Israelites because they're Israelites. And these people here are not Jews. They're Bani Israel. Okay? Now these 10 tribes, 10 of them, the first thing that this king, and I think his name is Jeroboam, this king does is he sets, their capital called Samara. What he does, he sets up idols, golden calves. Okay? He sets up golden calves. They fall into shirk straight away. Okay? In the northern kingdom. What also happens is they begin, the children of Israel, Bani Israel here, begin to worship an idol called Baal. Now Baal is in the Quran also. So here, they start to worship Baal. Is also Baal. Okay. So they worship Baal. Now, there's a prophet called Ilyas, and in the Old Testament it's called Elijah. He comes to tell them and warn them. Okay, warn them. Look, if you're going to carry on committing shirk, and these other prophets are sent, if you're going to carry on committing shirk, then you'll get destroyed. To warn you, don't. This where you are living currently is a blessing upon you, because this covenant that we have, there's conditions to it. You got to believe in Allah Azza wa Jal, not commit shirk, and you'll stay here. If you do, you'll be punished and expelled, and so forth. So what happens is, Ilyas or Elijah, he comes to tells Bani Israel, what you do, you're worshipping an idol called Baal. So they set this scene, they set this event. 400 priests of Baal are now then brought, and you have Baal the idol, and you have then Elijah. And what they do is, the challenge is, this animal that we've sacrificed, the priests are going to call upon Baal to send a fire from the heavens to come and burn it. And then they're going to come and dance around and whatnot to try to call upon Baal to send this fire. Nothing happens, obviously. And then when Elijah does it, the fire comes and it burns, and then people realize, oh, what we've done wrong. So some people come back. But just like as when prophets would come and go, they'd keep falling into shirk, and these prophets would come and warn them. So I haven't given you any dates here, by the way. Let's quickly just put some dates down on your timelines. So Musa alayhi salam is roughly about 1400 BC. Okay, and we're going to go backwards, right? So 0 is, they say, the time of where Isa alayhi salam was born, and then you go backwards. So 1400 years before Isa alayhi salam. Then we have the period of Talut and Dawood and Sulaiman is about, we're going to roughly say, about 1000 BC. Now, what happens is that we're counting down here. In about the year 700 and something, the Assyrians come and completely destroy. They were told, you're going to get destroyed. You're going to get punished for the shirk that you're doing, for the ridda that's happening, for all the things that you are doing. You will get finished. They didn't take the warning. The Assyrians, I shall conclude the Assyrians in the type of people here, they come, and the Assyrians, led by King Sargon II, not only does he destroy the kingdom, these 10 tribes, they call them the lost tribes of Israel. You know, you've heard the term, the lost tribes of Israel? This is where they get lost. We don't, their history, don't know about what actually really happened to them. Where did they get to? What happened? Lost tribes of Israel, because the way to remember this is Israel, because they used to be called Israel. They used to be called Judah. That's the names of the two kingdoms. Now, if you just go to my slide here, if you go to the next slide, that's you moved here. Okay, that's a relief of the actual Sargon II that he had in his palace. This is the king that was responsible for destroying the northern kingdom. This is his seal. Yeah, he's got a seal of himself killing a lion. Okay, that's his seal he used to use for his letters. Now this cuneiform is, and I believe this is in the British Museum. You can go and see this. So this is inscriptions on these rocks and stones. And this is where there's two inscriptions which mention his destruction. So he says here, I besieged and conquered Samaria, which is the capital of Northern Kingdom, capital of Israel. Led away a booty of 27,000 people, 27,000 prisoners. Don't know how many he killed, but he took 27,000 slaves. Now, who are these people? The children of prophets. Who are these people? Who were Muslims, original Muslims. Who are these people who have fallen into sin and shirk and idolatry and all these things, and they were warned and then an external enemy to them comes, and not only does he destroy them, he captures them and then finishes them off completely. So he says, I formed from among them a contingent of 50 chariots and made remaining inhabitants assume their positions. I installed upon them an officer of mine and imposed upon them the tribute of their former king, i.e. the tax. And then he also mentions, this is the next slide, he also mentions Israel by name, where he says, at the bottom where I've highlighted, I conquered and sacked the towns of Shinutu and Samaria and all Israel. So that's actually an archaeological evidence for that period of time. One of the things that they actually did, okay, one of the things that they would actually had done in the Northern Kingdom before they were destroyed, so not only were they committing shirk, the fasad, they were, I alluded to this earlier, that they used to sacrifice children. So what would happen is, this sacrifice that they would kill a child, they used to offer to a god called Molech. So not only were some of them worshiping Baal, they were doing this for Molech. And what they would do is, they would get a child outstretched before the idol, that was before Molech. And the idol was typically made up of bronze or iron. Okay. Now what they're going to do, then they're going to start a lot of drumming and noise, which is going to drown out the cries of the child who's going to die. And they were doing this to please this God. This is how low they went, because those people who were living in the surrounding areas of Israel were idol worshippers. So when they fall into apostasy and ridda, they're going to fall into what? Idol worship, like the people around them. Like today, when people fall into ridda, they start believing in, all sorts of kufr ideas and ideologies. Okay, ala kulli hal. And this, so now let's get to the southern kingdom. So this is then destroyed. The northern kingdom is destroyed. What happens to the southern kingdom? So this is not destroyed, right? We're remaining with Judah, and we only got 2 tribes of Judah. 2 tribes that are remaining in this civilization, which is, or this land of the southern kingdom. Here, prophets are sent, and from this time to about the year 5 something, before the destruction, the first time, the ayat I recited in the beginning, where Allah Ta'ala says, وَقَضَيْنَا إِلَى بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلِ فِي الْكِتَابِ لِتُفْسِدُنَّ فِي الْأَرْضِ مَرَّتَيْنِ وَتَعْلُنَّ عُلُوًّا كَبِيرًا. You're gonna do fasad twice, okay? And when you do fasad twice, I'll punish you. The first fasad that they do to which they're punished is in reference to what happens here. Because in the southern kingdom, Jerusalem, Quds, Masjid al-Aqsa is not in this kingdom. Jerusalem was always here. Okay? Now in Masjid al-Aqsa, they are Bani Israel who fall into shirk like they did here. They also do child sacrifices like they did here. And in actual fact, at one point, some of the kings of the Jews here in Judah put idols into Masjid al-Aqsa. They put idols into Masjid al-Aqsa. So this is how far they'd gone from Tawheed. Now, prophets would come and warn them, and some would listen. Okay? And some they would, kill, and some they would drive away. So there was all these things that are happening here. Who does Allah Azza wa Jal raise as Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran, in the ayat I recited, that فَإِذَا جَاءَ وَعْدُ أَوْلَاهُمَا بَعَثْنَا عَلَيْكُمْ عِبَادًا لَنَا أُولِي بَأْسٍ شَدِيدٍ فَجَاسُوا خِلَالَ الدِّيَارِ وَكَانَ وَعْدًا مَفْعُولًا. So when the first promise comes, I told you that if you're going to do this, I will destroy you. So when the fulfillment of that promise comes, we shall raise an army from those enslaved to us who are mighty in power. فَجَاسُوا خِلَالَ الدِّيَارِ وَكَانَ وَعْدًا مَفْعُولًا. That they're going to probe into your homes, and this was a promise fulfilled. What happened? Nebuchadnezzar, Bukht Nasr from Babylon came. He came into Jerusalem, and he came twice. I think in 590 something. He came 98. 598 he came first time. He conquered Jerusalem, conquered Quds, then left, and 15 years later or so, he came back, and this time the Masjid al-Aqsa was burnt and destroyed, leveled. So Masjid al-Aqsa that was built by Sulaiman alayhi salam, who they refer to as the Temple of Solomon, their Kaaba was then destroyed, whom we understand to be mushrikeen. So disbelieving armies came to punish the Muslims, the Muslim Ummah of the time, because of their fasad. Their fasad had reached such a high level, okay, that they were going to be destroyed. What happened here, and this is important now, okay? What happened here was, can I rub this off? Is that okay? Yeah? I'll leave the part where there's the people that are there. Nebuchadnezzar comes and he takes them to Babylon. So Nebuchadnezzar, he kills many, destroys the masjid, destroys the city, and then he enslaves them and he takes all of them to Babylon. Babylon is in Iraq. Okay? Now, I intended to have a map, an ancient map of Palestine and the Middle East, so you can visualize, but I forgot to show that on one of the slides. He kept them as slaves there in Babylon. Now, 47 years or so, they were kept as slaves. So these Muslims, and there were prophets amongst them, that were enslaved, and they were taken to Babylon. For 47 years or so, they were kept slaves. Then we have someone called King Cyrus the Great, who they refer to as King Cyrus the Great, who some ulama believed to be Dhul Qarnayn. They believe King Cyrus to be Dhul Qarnayn. Allahu A'lam. They send 47 years later. These are the Persians. This is the Persians. Okay, yeah. They're controlling now Jerusalem. King Cyrus sends some of Bani Israel, who we now refer to as Jews. He sent them back to Palestine, back to Jerusalem. And not only does he do that, but him and then I think King Darius, they pay for Masjid al-Aqsa to be rebuilt. But not all the Jews go to Palestine. So now what you have is you have a Palestinian Jewry and a Babylonian Jewry. And this is a distinction you must remember. Because even after, when what happens in Palestine, the second facade, the second destruction, the second expulsion happens to the Palestinian Jewry. The Babylonian Jewry, they're far away. And then many of them will go back to them, and then the Talmud will be formalized and written centuries later, but in Babylon, not Palestine, not in Philistine. Okay? So what happens is the kings of Persia, they delegate the rabbis to control the Jews who are now returned back to Jerusalem. So the Persians are still in control. The Persians are. Until Alexander the Great. In about the year 300 something. This is called, he was a Greek, and this ushers in what they call the Hellenistic period. So now they're cut off. They're cut off from the Babylonian Jewry now. They're under the Greeks. Now what happens is, under the Greeks, for about 150 years or so, up until the year about 180 BC, they're trying to get they're trying to influence. This is after Alexander now. Alexander's passed away. His kingdom is split into different empires, and they're trying to force Greek upon the people living in Jerusalem. The people are not having it. Okay, the people are not having it. So there is something called the Maccabi revolt. This happens because the leader of the Greeks, he places the idol Zeus in Masjid al-Aqsa. And he's forcing the people to do shirk. He's not allowing them to do their ibadat. He's forcing so much fasad, or so much shirk and kufr upon the people. They rebel. The Maccabes, they oust the Greeks. They use guerrilla tactics, and they win the war. Now they've expelled the Greeks. Now they take control. So they have a bit of a height. Okay? So they're low, they have not big of a height. Now they're controlling themselves until the Romans arrive. The Romans arrive, I think, around the year 60 BC or so. So the Romans are now, by the time when Isa alayhi salam comes, they're under the Romans. Now they've got just before Isa alayhi salam is reported to have been born, there was King Herod, who was a Jewish king, but he was he was like a vassal state, a client state for the Romans themselves. They were having him, just like the situation today. Many of our countries, they're vassal states. They say they're independent, but they're just client states. They're not independent themselves. They report to their masters sitting in the Western capitals. That's the reality. So now we come to now time of Isa alayhi salam. So I'll just finish off here, then let's explain the ayat. So Isa alayhi salam, let's say the year 0. Now, this was their Messiah. This was their Messiah. Now they're trying to, here, the people who are committing shirk, they're trying to cleanse the society. And these ups and downs that happen within any society where people come to the deen, they practice, they're strong, then they may fall into shirk, then people try to bring them back. And that's why the jobs of the scholars of today in our ummah is like what the jobs of the prophets were in the ummah before. Here, what do they do? What do Bani Israel, what's the right of the Bani Israel here? What do they do with their prophet? They reject him. They try to kill, they think that they've killed him. Now, they think that they've killed him, and you know, the state of the situation within this situation of Bani Israel, the first Muslim Ummah in Jerusalem at this time, is that what's been reported in the New Testament is once Isa alayhi salam, he walks into Masjid al-Aqsa, he sees all these people doing tijara and trade and all in the courtyard, doing all this business, and he says, you know, this is meant to be the house of prayer, but you have turned it into the den of thieves. Meaning this, and then he's reported to throw the tables out because you turn the masjid into this, corruption for what should be for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal is then made for dunyavi purposes and whatnot. If Isa alayhi salam is risen when he's 33 years old, he even tells and prophesies about Masjid al-Aqsa that there will be no 2 bricks left. And in actual fact, there are, for those who may know, James, who's referred to as James, the brother of Jesus, who was in charge of what they call the Jerusalem church, they knew about the prophecies of what's going to happen to Quds, what's going to happen to Bayt al-Maqdis. So they left. And in the year 70, the Roman Titus comes and he does a siege upon Jerusalem and then does the same thing that Nebuchadnezzar did, which was to burn the masjid and then to destroy it completely. Because the facade that they had committed, they were promised that they will be punished, and that's the punishment that would come to them. Now, we have an account. I'll show you this slide. Is it recording? You good? Yeah? Okay, so I've got to show you this slide. This is also on cuneiform, a chronicle of Nebuchadnezzar. So just like we had before of the other king, this is an inscription by Nebuchadnezzar himself about how he laid siege to the city of Judah, referring to the southern kingdom. So these are just archaeological inscriptions of what we find, what has been or occurred in the past. What was I about to say? The ayah, yes. Okay. So Allah Ta'ala is saying to them, you caused two corruptions which led to you being destroyed. And so Allah says to them, let's just remind, this is now happening in Makkah, reminding Bani Israel, where are some of the remnants of Bani Israel? They're in Medina waiting for the Prophet to come. Now the Prophet hasn't made it to Medina yet, but they're already in Medina waiting for their Nabi who's been prophesied. If you look in Isaiah 42, you'll see Isaiah prophesied about the prophet, the Arabian prophet, that the tribes of Kedar is the son of Ismail. From there you'd have the descendants of people in Makkah. The people of Makkah, the towns of Kedar, i.e. the towns of Makkah should rejoice, and the town of Sela. Sela is the mountain which, if you've been to Masjid Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam in Medina, the closest mountain to the Haram, closer than Uhud, is Mount Sela. And in that prophecy it speaks about the people of Sela should also rejoice, i.e. the people of Makkah and Medina rejoice about this prophet, this new prophet, as Isaiah puts it in 42. So Allah Ta'ala is reminding them and told them, look, it was decreed that you're going to cause fasad to such a high level, and then you will be destroyed twice. When the first promise comes, the army was raised against you and probed into your homes. ثم رددنا لكم الكرة عليهم وأمددناكم بأموال وبنين وجعلناكم أكثر نفيرا. Then the tide changed. إن أحسنتم أحسنتم لأنفسكم. If you do good, it's good for yourself. And if you do bad, then it's against you. فإذا جاء وعد الآخرة. Then the second promise, that you're going to cause this fasad. ليسوء وجوهكم. That your faces will be saddened and blackened and distraught. And they will وَلَيَدْخُلُوا الْمَسْجِدَ كَمَا دَخَلُوهُ أَوَّلَ مَرَّةٍ. They're gonna re-enter into masjid like the first time they did. وَلِيَتَبِّرُوا مَا عَلَوْا تَتْبِيرًا. And then they're gonna destroy it. Right? Now look what Allah Ta'ala says. After all that history of what Bani Israel has gone through, of rises and falls, of tawheed and shirk, of jihad and cowardice, this is not for them. Asa rabbukum an yarhamakum. Perhaps your Lord will still have mercy on you. After 1400 years, no, more than 1400 years, maybe 2000 years of all that they went through, and now they're in Medina, they're being pre-warned. Asa rabbukum an yarhamakum. Maybe Allah Ta'ala will still have mercy upon you. When udtum udna. And if you return to that fasad, then we shall return back to you with that punishment. وَجَعَلْنَا جَهَنَّمَ لِلْكَافِرِينَ حَسِيرًا. And we have made Jahannam for the disbelievers a hasira. There are a number of scholars of given the explanation for these ayat based on classic traditional mufassirin of how they explain these ayat. A lot of the modern scholars, amongst them Sheikh Dadu, amongst them Sheikh Sha'arawi, Khalidi, and others, they believe that the second fasad that's being spoken of here is the fasad that's happening now. And they believe that this is a prophecy about the reconquering of Masjid al-Aqsa again. So this is how they interpret. This I found the argument had weight, Allahu Alam, but I do feel the classic interpretation is the strong and the correct one, and Allah Ta'ala knows better. So that's a very high overview of the history of Bani Israel up to 70 AD, up to the second destruction. Inshallah, at some point we'll do the next 1,000 years of what happened, and then the third lecture could be up to now, the history of the history of Bani Israel. Are there any questions? So they obviously had some prominent. So the question is, what was the situation with the Jews who remained in Babylon after King Cyrus? Obviously, they had strong positions because they were told they could control the Jews that went to Palestine, back to Palestine. So it was a good condition for them, a strong condition for them, up until obviously the Greeks came in and then they beat them and they cut that form of that line. Yes.
You said there was 12 spies who went. The beginning is there's 12 spies who went. Were the 12 spies the one from each tribe?
Yes. They were tried.
Tribes were from the two spies from the leading spies.
Yes. So obviously the question is were there 12 spies from the 12 tribes according to the Old Testament? Yes. Are there tribes named? Either two from which tribe? The ones that said that we will fight. They are named in the Old Testament. However, you can't trust the Old Testament. As I said to you before, that detail, because of the amount of corruption that's taken place with people who have put into the Old Testament, where people who may belong to certain tribes will put their own tribes' names down to glorify their tribe as how great they were and how bad the others were. That's why you have to be careful.
Is this something interesting that you mentioned about Darius and he brought the Jews into the Persian Empire and about the lost tribes of the Israelites? I just remember there's a hadith about the Jews of Isfahan.
Yes, Dajjal.
Would that be the lost tribes?
No, okay, remember, the lost tribes of Israel, what they call the lost tribes of Israel, are the northern kingdom that got destroyed by the Assyrians. Okay? Now, so he is who? The Assyrians. I think they control part of, but we're talking. But by the time of Nebuchadnezzar, I mean, obviously their kingdoms changed, so they may be referred to. I don't know what was the kingdoms did change, and the Assyrian kingdom did it control part of Iraq? Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I know, but the thing is, what was the name of that kingdom? Obviously, like because they maybe so. Maybe you're right. But the thing is, remember, look, okay, when we say now the lost tribes of Israel, when we say that.
And then there's more than one Persian Empire.
Good. It's cut it.
Yeah.